I invited AgXplore to this. I hadn't used a lot of their products for very long, but I guess what impressed me most was Gunther Kreps. He came out here and he reformulated some of his product that would work with a biological in furrow. And most companies that had had some humic acids or some sugars that had some metals in it aren't compatible with biologicals in furrow. They just pretty much say, so what, pick one. So I was pretty impressed with AgXplore's ability to react and kind of make a product that will work with different systems that people are wanting to try. So that's been a really neat experience. And Gunny's been a great resource to get to know. So he's up first, and then we've got Alan Parrish with Pivot Bio and Ryan Kuhlsman with Pivot Bio, are two agronomists. A lot of knowledge there, and they're going to talk a little bit about Pivot Bio when Gunny gets done. So it's all you, Gunny.
All right, Brian. Thank you. Morning, guys.
Morning.
All right. Lively group. I like having a setting like this because it can't be like church, because most people I notice at the back filled in first, right? And I'm like, that's fine. If you won't come to me, I will come to you. So guys, like Brian said, he calls me Gunny. Everybody calls me Gunny. Please call me Gunny. My real name is actually Gunther Kreps. I'm probably the only Gunther that you're going to get to meet today. My parents hated me. That's why. But I do hail from Lafayette, Indiana. So I live just on a farm just east of Lafayette, Indiana. I've been in this business for a little over 20 years now. I did graduate from Purdue. Please don't throw me out the door. I know there's a lot of UI folks in the crowd today. But Purdue is the best truck driving school in the state of Indiana. And I had a CDL for a long time, but I'm just hoping our football team just doesn't suck this year is my only prayer. But guys, I got to know Brian. Where's Brian? Brian, so stay there, Brian, because I'm going to call on you a few times today. So he said he doesn't like to speak in public, so I'm going to make sure he speaks in public today. But guys, Brian, we met, what, year and a half, 2 years ago, somewhere on there. And as Brian has learned, I'm pretty passionate about crops. I've been around, I grew up on a farm in very northern Indiana. I have some farm ground in western Indiana today. And I've spent all my career in agriculture. So most of it's been in the ag retail. The last 4 years, I've been blessed to be with a company called AgXplore, who's owned by a gentleman named Tim Gutwein, which is part of that Gutwein family, if you guys are familiar with the old Gutwein seed. Guys, something that I like to talk about with everybody when I get a chance, whether it's one-on-one or a crowd setting like this, is about truly managing a crop. Guys, how many guesses? And this will be a participation meeting. Okay, so I want to see some responses back. If you don't, we have a mic set up for karaoke, and we'll bring you to the stage and we'll sing karaoke today. Okay, how many, on average, how many times do you get to do your crop right? How many? One. And how often? Once a year. Exactly. So guys, on average, there was a poll, there was a university that did a study that talked about the amount of times a farmer in their career where they're the ones calling the shots. So when you guys are calling the shots, how many times you get to make it right? You get about 40 on average. Some of you more, some of you a little bit less, right? But when you make the shots, you get 40 times to do it right. Think about that. And it's all the pieces that you do in that 1 year, right, to get that one crop right. You only get 40 chances to do it right. There's a lot of folks that come out to you and that will talk to you about the silver bullets that always add 20 bushel, right? It just never seems to end. Somebody will come up and say, I got this one product, you put it on, and guys, you put, it's 20 bushel every time. Got K-State data that says it is, right? They pulled the one good piece of data. Folks, I'm here to tell you that I'm not going to do that to you today. I'm going to talk to you about some tweaks in farming that I see and have observed that have been successful, from whether it's in Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, it don't matter, wherever we grow corn. There are certain things we can do to make minor tweaks to make major impacts on what we do on farms. That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about managing a crop. I'm going to use some terminology today that you guys probably aren't used to, as far as the 5 phases of managing a crop. So I want to start with this. Where'd my board go? I'm going to move this back over here. Typically, Vanna White comes up and helps me, but Scott, I'll leave you sit in the back today, if you guys know Scott Bingman. So we're going to do this, okay? As I think about farming, I think about everything that it takes to go into that crop from day one. And there are 5 phases. And for the sake of time, since I only get 30 minutes to start off with, I just went ahead and wrote these down. There are 5 phases that I talk about where we can positively influence this crop. Starting with the foundation phase, okay? Then we go to an establishment phase, an architecture phase, a reproduction phase, and a maturity phase. And I'm going to walk through each one of those, and I'm going to ask you guys some things that we do within these phases. So let's start with foundation. Anybody know what I mean by foundation? The foundation phase? What are some things that we do in the fall? Actually, let me ask you this question first. When is day 1 for next year's crop?
60 days ago.
60 days ago? Okay. Brandon. Say when the combine leaves the field.
When the combine leaves the field.
That's exactly right, Brandon. It is when the combine leaves the field. So think about this. Everything that you guys do from the day the combine leaves the field is in preparation for that next year's crop, right? Do you guys, who in here, show of hands, who in here does their best to manage residue? Okay, and guys, I will tell you, it's okay to raise your hand. I know you don't want your neighbor to know, but they already know what you're doing, so just go ahead and raise your hand. It's okay. So a handful of you guys are doing some things for residation, whether it's new corn heads that chop up the stalks, or you're putting out some biologicals in the fall, or you're putting some UAN or ATS to help feed the biology to break down those corn stalks. You know, when I was a kid, and I'm in my mid-40s now, but when I was a kid, and for those of you that about my age or a little bit older, do you remember in the early 80s, my dad would shell corn. I'd take the 4-wheeler going down the end rows on a cornfield, and you look down them corn rows, you saw corn stalks, dirt, corn stalks, dirt, corn stalks, dirt. You guys remember those days? Right, well, we didn't put so much trash out, right? We're building bigger, stronger plants today because of the genetic potential that we have today with the genetics that we have, right? It has changed in the last 40 years, right? 30 years, really the last 20 years. We're putting out more. How many of you guys go back to beans after corn? A lot, right? Most of us. So when you think about our soil temperatures going into spring, managing that residue is pretty important, right? That is a step in it. What are some other things that we do from, let's say, the combine to the planter? Anybody in here use fertilizer? Right? I know everybody uses. Who in here is not paying enough for fertilizer? Show of hands. All right, thank you for participating in that one. No, everybody's knows it is expensive this year. But guys, think about fertilizer management and things that we can do to improve our fertilizer efficiency. Here in a little bit, you're going to hear from the folks from Pivot Bio, and they're going to talk to you about some ways to improve nitrogen use efficiency within your crop with some of their technology. Right, guys? Yep. Okay. I'm going to come back later and talk about tying some things in after they get done talking after lunch. But there's a lot of nutrient use efficiency things that we can do during that time phase to help improve the nutrients to that crop when that crop gets up and gets going. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about establishment. I'm assuming everybody in here loves corn the way that I love corn, right? Fair enough, right? It's our passion. We all love to raise corn. So I need to make sure I grab the right marker because I'm going to switch boards. When you think about establishment, guys, I know when you wake up after planting corn, look out the kitchen window and you look at the cornfield and you want to see even emergence, right? What happens when you don't see even emergence? You're gonna fight it all year long, right? Who in here uses fungicides late season? Right? A lot of us, right? See a lot of head shaking. What happens when the tassels don't shoot out all at the same time? It sucks, right? Right? So even emergence is really important. What are some things we can do to get even emergence? Anybody? Starter fertilizers? Right? Thinking about starter fertilizers, using some pop-up starter fertilizers, using some 2x2 starter fertilizers, working with technologies to get that root system up and getting it going. Guys, what's important about feeding a baby plant? When is the most important time in a corn plant? I'm going to pull this ear. Can you hold up one of them tiny little ears, like the one that's in front over there? Who likes my ear? Show of hands. Versus who likes his ear? Okay. When is this ear determined? Let's see, that was fun. When are these ears determined? When are the number of kernels around determined, guys? This is important. V5. Somebody said it over here. Who was it? right on, between V3 and V5, which is pretty small corn. And when I talk about V stages, I'm talking about collars, right? They're like my shirt collar. When they form that ring around the back of the stalk and they form this V in the front, that's a collar, right? Between V3 and V5 is the most important time to get it right. There are technologies and fertilizers that you need to consider when you're doing this. I want to talk through the physiology of a corn plant just real quick. How many root systems are on a corn plant, guys? How many main root systems are there in a corn plant? Say 2. Somebody said it. Say 2. It's exactly right. There are 2 corn plants, and guys, are 2 root systems on a corn plant. So you guys are all going out and planting what? 2 1/4 inches deep, somewhere around there, give or take, right? So, and I'm no artist, so don't judge me. This is your seed. There's this first little root system that comes out, and this little system is called the seminal root system. Okay? All the way through V6, the corn plant is living off the nutrients and energy held within this seed and within this, what it gets out of this root system right here. Okay? So all the way through V6. It's establishing that nodal root system, that primary root system, while it's going through V6. So that way when it changes, it'll flip over to that root system, go to the vegetative stages. But guys, it's really important to understand fertility and what you can do to impact the number of kernels around. This little baby right here, she suffered, right? There was something suffering in this plant when this year was determined as compared to this one. So I didn't count the number of kernels around on this one. This one's 20 around. We'd all love to have 20 around, right? On every ear. So guys, in a seed by itself has 5 to 11 days of nutrients in it. Okay? Now we all know that there's no way that we can make V6 in 11 days. It's just not possible, right? Something that I really like and some things that we have done that we've demonstrated over here, you'll find we have 3 different genetics. We've got a Bex, an FS, and a DeKalb hybrids that are over here. That what we did is we pushed the starter fertilizer along with the Pivot Bio in furrow, the Proven 40, and we tried to push it to be able to set the number of kernels around early. So when you get a chance, when we take a break for lunch, come up here and look at these. You'll find anywhere from, it's predominantly 18 around, there's several 20s, and there's a couple 16s that are in there as well. But these are 10 in a row off of each one, right? Consecutive ears. Guys, as you think about starter fertilizers, I'm a big fan of pop-up starter fertilizer, laying it directly on top of the seed. Obviously, you want to use a low-salt starter fertilizer so you don't burn that seed, right? Okay, and when you're putting it with conjunction of Pivot Bio, there are technologies that you want to put with, and there's technologies you don't want to put with live biological products because some of them are a little bit detrimental on colonies, right, guys? So some things that we did here on Brian's farm that impacted these heres over here in combination with his 624-6, right, Brian? Is the Pro Valley Blue. So, but that's a white acid, right? So it's a low salt white acid, highly available form of phosphorus. We combine that with a couple of technologies to help support the Pivot Bio. And I'll let these guys tell the reasons why Pivot Bio and the Proven 40. What we wanted to do was we wanted to help establish the Pivot Bio product, the Proven 40. What we did by doing that is we added 2 forms of carbon. One is a product called Inferno. Inferno is predominantly a humic acid. It has a traditional humic acid and a biochemically extracted humic acid, as well as some other amino acids in it to help that root system get stimulated by nutrient flow and efficiency inside of the plant. The other part that we added to it was a product called Octane, and Octane is a multiple sugar source product. You know, believe it or not, biology and plants like different forms of carbon. They don't like just one form of carbon. So what we did is put multiple carbon complexes in there to help that plant get established, help the Proven 40 get colonized and get it established in the soil and allow it to do its thing throughout the duration of the year. The other thing that we did with the technologies that are built into it is we help by increasing nutrient mobility inside the plant. We helped establish that root system and establish root hairs on that system, all simply because we made that plant more efficient. It's not a PGR. It's not like Kynotin or IBA or like a SEN type products with gib acid. It is just a different way of making that plant factory more efficient. So those are some things that we've done up here, and we wanted to demonstrate for you guys and show you just what happens when you use a good off-the-start starter fertilizer program. Okay? Fair enough? Questions? Feel free to jump in at any time, guys. Okay? Let's talk about the next phase. Let's talk about architecture. So I've had a CCA for a lot of years, and everywhere I go, they talk about the vegetative stage. At AgX, we started talking about it a little bit differently. We started talking about the architecture, the physical shape of that plant. You know, we know that if we pour nitrogen on it, that root system changes at V6, it grows a foot overnight, and it takes off like a rocket, right? And it responds well to nitrogen. But what if, guys, we could make a bigger, fatter, wider leaf? Why is that important? If I have a bigger, fatter, wider leaf on one plant versus another plant, what are leaves? Somebody said it. Catch more sunlight. Guys, leaves are solar panels. Your plants are factories, right? They capture sunlight, they metabolize it, and they turn it into energy. They turn it into acetate energy inside that plant. And that's what gets that plant up and gets it going, right? It's also a storage vessel to hold nutrients so when you get late season, you can mobilize those into your grain and get yield and test weight from, right? So there are things that were done early that impacted the architecture phase, okay? Show you a couple demonstrations of some things of starter and no starter. Now, guys, I know he's dead, but I think Ray Charles, he's blind and dead. I think Ray Charles can see the difference in this one, okay? Who in here thinks this is significant to crop production? Right, the difference in that. All of us do, right? Guys, when we think about this, what do you think this is attributed to? Population can be part of it. It can impact it. The closer the spacings, the more they compete, and the smaller that this can impact. So there are things that we can do to help that root system go out and capture more water and nutrients, right? When you think about the specific nutrient that impacts stalk diameter and leaf width, it's potassium, right? Simply by altering and helping establish that plant going into the architecture phase, you can impact the uptake of potassium out of the soil, okay? This is a potassium change, right? Major difference. As you think about leaf width, that's also directly attributed to potassium. So guys, there are things that you can do on foliar passes. So most of us, we have learned throughout our careers that in more cases than not, especially with water hemp, and for those of you that fight palmer, that the 2-pass program is really important in weed control in corn production, right? So coming with that post-trip and putting something on it that has a micronutrient package that consists of copper, iron, manganese, zinc, molybdenum, boron, those type products, those are built to help support photosynthesis, right? A lot of the products talk about building a bigger plant and building a bigger leaf structure. But if you're missing those 5, which we typically think is just a shotgun approach, it's not, they're designed products. Those products are in there to help support the acceptance of sunlight, turn that into energy, and allow that plant to actually do its thing. So there's multiple products that are on the market today that you can see from multiple vendors, but make sure that you're thinking about supporting photosynthesis once you've built that plant architecture. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, something that you're already making an application, it's a small tweak, just dumping another jug or pumping another tote, right? That you can make a positive influence and a positive impact on your crop. Okay, let's talk about reproduction. I think, Brian, I got, 5 minutes yet? 5 to 10 minutes? Okay, so this is a really powerful one. Powerful opportunity to positively influence your not only your yield, but your test weight, your test yield and test weight at this point in time. So guys, who in here runs fungicide? I heard a plane flying this morning already. Like most of us are probably running fungicides. Most of us are believed. Some of us have had some experiences that are in between. Guys, personally, I have no dog in the fight. I don't sell a fungicide. I believe in fungicides. I believe fungicides are consistent. Are they consistent year in and year out? No. There's no one fungicide that works every single time. We know that. It's more like an insurance policy. But it's talking about playing the game of averages and the law of averages. Fungicides pay, in my opinion. Who in here just thinks fungicides control disease? I think we've all learned that they do so much more than that, right? They also help with overall plant health. BASF is huge on talking about plant health. Guys, there are other things that you need to be thinking about in late season plant health, not just in corn, but on soybeans as well, okay? What happens in August, on a typical August day here in southern Illinois? It's finally starting to happen today. What's Mother Nature do?
Heavy dew.
What's that?
Heavy dew.
Heavy dew, right? So that's a cause for disease inoculant, right? What else does it do? It gets hot, freaking hot in here. And so, I mean, I'm from the north part of Indiana, and it gets hot down here, guys. I don't know how you guys sweat it out down here, but it's hot. The other part it does is it typically gets dry, right? What do plants do when it gets hot and dry? They get stressed. It's like my wife yelling at me. I get stressed, right? And you start to shut down. And when a plant starts to shut down in corn, what you start to see is that thing called tip back. And you'll see some examples of some tip back on some of the ears that are sitting around the room today. That can be caused by some of the late season stresses. Okay? On soybeans, Mother Nature, you can do everything right all season long, guys. And Mother Nature will come in, she'll get hot, she'll get dry, she'll produce ethylene inside that plant, and she'll start kicking off those pods. It'll be kicking off those blooms. And she's going to try to produce what she can produce inside that plant, right? And that's where you start losing yield. The other thing about late season stresses is you start to impact the test weight, right? Who in here loves hauling corn to the elevator that's 55 pounds? No one, right? 55, 58 pounds, no one, right? We like heavy corn, right? We like 60, 62 pound test weight, the good, heavy, dense corn. Let's face it, we get paid by weight, right? We don't get paid by volume, we get paid by weight. So the heavier we can make that corn, the better off our outcome is, right? When you think about PGRs, you guys know what I mean by PGRs, plant growth regulators, or hormones, whatever you want to call them, pick a name. PGRs in the market today have been developed for early season purposes, okay? And it's all about early season root and shoot establishment. If you have ever run a product like Ascend, Ascend is a good product. Ascend has got IBA, which is indole-butyric acid. It has kynotin. Kynotin can actually be used all season long. And it also has a product called gib acid. Gib acid is about germination. The IBA, in conjunction with kynotin at that early season application, tell a plant to spend its energy on roots and shoots. Okay? And they are great tools for early season getting a plant up and getting it going. It's one avenue to get it up and getting it going. They miss the nutrition to support them, so you got to make sure you tank mixture nutrition to support that plant from a foliar basis. But they will help that plant get up and get established and set a root system and put some root hairs underneath it. I tell you this because there's a product out on the market today called Onward Max, and it's a product that I've personally been working with since 2016. We launched the first one called Onward that is specific for late season applications to drop ethylene, drop that stress hormone, and allow plants to not cause that tip back or cause that pod abortion, right? And allow that plant to hold on to its fruiting sites, whether it's a kernel or a pod or a flower, right? So there's a product that Brian has on one of these that's up here called Onward Max. Onward Max is a combination of kynotin, choline chloride, and GABA. And the later two you probably have not heard of before because they're not common. They're not products you would use early season. They tell a plant to drop its stress, the ethylene glycol, and to keep photosynthesizing. They also work with boron and help that plant mobilize nutrition up and down that plant. When you think about late season nutrient mobility within that plant, all season long it's going to build this big robust plant, and then it needs to pull that nutrition out of that leaf, out of that stalk, and shove it into that kernel or shove it into that pod if it's on a soybean plant. Right? That's where yield and test weight comes from. That late season nutrient mobility is called source to sink movement. Okay? So it pulls out of the leaf, out of that stalk, that source, shoves it into that sink, into that kernel. Okay? That GABA and choline chloride in combination with kynotin will allow that mobility to happen more efficiently. So you'll get all this that's stored up in the storage vessel and you'll get it shoved into that plant. That's where yield and test weight comes from. And we have some demonstrations of a product, and Brian would be happy to talk with you guys about that, one-on-one, or you can catch me afterwards. But sake of time, I don't have a whole lot of time today to get into it. Okay. So guys, another question for you, crowd participation. Who in here is just freaking done when they sprayed the fungicide pass? You're tired, you're ticked off, you want to go to the lake, you want to go to Florida, you don't see the crop until you pull in with the combine, right? I see some guys laughing, right? It's reality. Hey, guys, I grew up on a farm, I get it. I spent a lot of years in retail, and if somebody would have came to me and said, hey, look, there's more that you can still do, I'd probably punch them in the nose, right? Because I'm just tired. I understand it, fellas, but I'm going to tell you. I'm not a big fan of universities when it comes to these new technologies because they spend 10 years trying to figure it out. And I'm throwing Purdue in that bucket as well. They're still working on stuff that we're 2 generations past by the time they figured out yes or no, does it work, right? It's just a fact. But Purdue shocked the heck out of me a couple years ago. They actually came out with a paper and says, guys, we give up on crops too early. And I thought, what? We give up on crops too early? And they said, yes, there is yield to be made. Okay. If you think about the draw on like potassium late season, whether it's in a corn plant or in a soybean plant, the late season demand of potassium is actually higher than nitrogen, believe it or not. If you look at the studies and when it actually utilizes potassium, you can positively impact yield, and by that yield retention, and you can positively impact test weight with late season applications of potassium. A farm that I work with in western Indiana, right up along the state line of Illinois, for the last 2 years has taken 61 and 62 pound test weight of soybeans to the elevator consistently. Those are heavy beans. I personally have not experienced 62 pound test weight on soybeans before this, but it's about making that last trip. You also want to stack some boron in there, right? Boron is the traffic cop of nutrients, and it helps direct that nutrient flow. And a pint of boron, guys, is one of the best investments I can tell you to do in that application. Your crop throughout the growing season, hear me, write this down, needs a quart of boron at some point during that growing season. So either pint post or a pint, and a pint at reproductive or late after that, or a quart at reproductive. Right? Your crops will respond to boron. Mark my words on that. It'll be one of the best investments you can make. So guys, these are the 5 phases that we think about. If you think about, just to sum it all up, things that we can do. And I'm going to walk through just simple little things that we can do. This one right here, we can go and manage the residue, right? Make it so those soils either warm up or dry out and you're able to get in at an earlier time. You also have the opportunity for that crop to come up through that residue and be even emerged, right? That's the step 1. Step 2 is get that plant, get it up, get it going, get a root system underneath it, allow it to go after that nutrition, allow it to be able to be well fed between V3 and V5 when it's determined the number of kernels around. There's technologies and there are fertilizers that work really well in that application. This architecture piece, guys, tank mixing some things that got the micronutrient package and technology to support a bigger, fatter, wider leaf and that solar panel to accept that sunlight and get it going is really beneficial. Reproductive, obviously fungicides and late season PGRs are really impactful in this one. And then maturity, coming and finishing it off with a potassium application is something that you guys got to see for yourself. I've done it a lot of times. I get that we're tired and we want to go to the lake, but guys, there's money to be made yet on your crop. Okay, I tried to keep that in 30 minutes. Usually that's an hour talk, folks, so questions? Yes, sir.
Potassium on a corn crop
Mm-hmm.
after fungicide.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most common?
Common source?
Well, common source and also application method.
So obviously on a corn crop, you don't want to go with an airplane or a high boy. You know, I personally hate driving through corn. If you got a good operator that's got the sensors and he can stay in between the rows, that's great. I know that's a way to save some dollars, but I also feel that paying for that airplane probably pays for itself by not running down corn. So flying it on is the late season application. I know planes are tight and helicopters are tight that time of year because they're all trying to finish the phase before. So access is a limitation that I do get.
Is it too early at the fungicide application for the same product for potassium?
Yep. So what's your name? Frank. So Frank just asked, is it too early to put the potassium on during the fungicide application? Frank, I'll tell you that most of my recommendations, knowing that we either don't have access to a machine or a aerial machine, or you're not willing to go back and do this one, I tell people to put potassium in here. I will tell you, folks, that not all potassium when it comes to a foliar potassium is created equal. Potassium acetate is 4.5 times more efficient in foliar uptake and utilization versus any form of foliar potassium on the market, bar none. So University of Texas A&M did a great study and proved that years ago. When you look at a foliar application, timing followed by source are the two most important things that I think about. So yes, you can use it during that time. And I'd say most of it that I recommend goes on in that application, just knowing guys won't go back. So good question. Chelated? No, it's an acetate formulation. So there are potassium carbonates, nitrates, sulfates. There's just a lot of other types of potassium. Acetate is actually the plant's natural energy molecule. It's the final product of photosynthesis within a plant. So it's potassium with acetate. Okay? So, and it's just by far the most efficient form of foliar uptake. Now, when it comes to soil applied, I don't think potassium acetate is any better than any other in the market because the soil interactions that happen with the root system and breakdown and chemistry, there's a lot more to that story than just directly putting it on a leaf. Yeah, good question, though. Questions, guys? Okay. I'm going to come back at the very end of this, and I'm going to tie some things together after these gentlemen talk about how a little bit more science on the nitrogen side, and then how their products, along with the combinations that Brian did on his farm, how it all works together.